Now, last example is the Gerald Ford. This ship cost $13 billion. It cost $13 billion. The annual defense budget for the Iranians is $10 billion. It goes into the war theater, and 3 weeks afterwards, it has to run away, okay? And in fact, the Americans say, oh, the Gerald Ford, this is the most advanced supercarrier in the world. It's probably going to be down for repairs for the next 2 years. And there's argument as to what happened, okay? There are 3 different possibilities. The first possibility is that there was an accident in the laundry room, and there's a fire, and this fire spread throughout the carrier, okay? Which means that actually the carrier is not very resilient, okay? So that's one possibility, and that's what the official story is. But there are also others who say like the Iranians hit the ship with a missile. And so the Gerald Ford can't protect itself from Iranian missiles, so it ran away, okay? The third possibility, the third explanation is the Pentagon recognized that there are severe limitations of the Gerald Ford in actual combat operations. Its radar, its guidance system are all very limited. So the Pentagon withdrew the Gerald Ford because it was absolutely useless in war, right? Whichever story is true, it doesn't paint a good picture of the American military. $13 billion, and this does nothing, okay? It's just a white elephant. The Iranians are the, and also, this is Iwo Jima, and this came in World War II in the Pacific Theater when the Americans were fighting the Japanese. And this is the height of American military glory, okay? It took about 6,000, the Americans lost 6,000 Marines in taking this island. And that's the sacrifice you need in order to win wars. You're gonna lose a lot of soldiers. And Americans are proud that they were willing to make the sacrifice necessary to win the war. The problem is Americans are no longer willing to sustain casualties, okay? So the Americans sent about 5,000, around 5,000 Marines to Iran, hoping that 5,000 Marines will be enough to win this war, okay? But it just shows you the Americans have no strategy to win this war, and they don't want to make the necessary sacrifices to win this war. They want to win this war as quickly and as cheaply as possible, okay? The Israelis are different, okay? This is Gaza. And we all know that what Gaza did was terrible. But again, if you are auditioning to be an empire, Gaza is proof of concept, okay? Meaning it's showing the global elite, look, we're willing to do what it takes to win this war and defend the empire, okay? So this was a tremendous tragedy, and it's all war crimes, okay? And the entire world is aghast. But if you look at Israeli public opinion, 82% support expelling all Palestinians from Gaza, okay? 66% believe Amalek exists today. Amalek is just like Israel has this great enemy that it must defeat, right? So 66% of Israelis believe that this war against Gaza is a war for the very existence of Israel, okay? This is unity. This is determination. The Americans don't have this. Most Americans oppose what Israel is doing in Gaza. But Israelis themselves support what's going on, okay? So there's unity, all right? All right, so in 2024, there was the famous Lebanon pager attack, okay? Meaning that the Israelis were able to implant bombs into pagers that went to Hezbollah members. And then it blew up, okay? And maybe from a military perspective, it didn't accomplish that much. From a psychological perspective, it accomplished a lot, okay? It scared the living hell out of Hezbollah. It made them paranoid, and it also made the world respect Israel more. And Israel spent $275 million to conduct this operation that took decades to implement, okay? And you're like, okay, why is Israel telling us this? Because again, Israel is auditioning to be the new empire. It's telling the global elite, look, not only will we fight this war for you, not only will we be your muscle, but we'll do it cheaply, man. Not billions of dollars, millions of dollars. This is ISIS. ISIS is Islamic State, okay? And this is considered a terrorist organization. These Sunni extremists who go around and beheading people, all right? Now, this is from the New York Times, and the yellow tells you areas in which they operate. And as you can see, it's really across the Middle East. And the red are incidents of attacks directed by ISIS, okay? Now, something that's really funny about all this is ISIS attacks everywhere in the Middle East except for one country, and that country is Israel, okay? Really funny how you have these Muslim extremists going around committing all sorts of atrocities everywhere in the Middle East except Israel. And so that's why a lot of people believe that Islamic State is actually a creation of Mossad. But again, Israel is happy for the world to know this because again, Israel is auditioning to be the new empire. And what Israel is saying is, we don't have to use the American strategy of just bombing everyone to death, okay? That's expensive, that's brutal, and it's not very strategic. We can use Mossad to infiltrate groups and use these groups against their comrades, their neighbors. Isn't that much more efficient? Is that much more effective, okay? So what Israel is saying is, we are much better at controlling the Middle East than the Americans. So let us control the Middle East using our strategies, okay? This is a story of a Mossad agent who was disguised as an ISIS preacher, okay? And this happens a lot. There are lots of stories where you have these ISIS commanders or agents, and when you arrest them, you discover, okay, actually, they're actually Mossad, okay? So ISIS is basically a Mossad operation. All right, so the main story here is, okay, if you look at history, the relationship between Israel and America is actually pretty simple. Israel is the pit bull for America. The problem with an empire as it grows old is it doesn't want to do bad things, okay? It wants to feel good about itself. Therefore, it subcontracts the violence, the murder, the genocide to different people, okay? To mercenaries, the Israelis in the Middle East. And this is a pattern throughout human history. So the Romans started out as mercenaries for the Etruscans in Italy. The Aztecs started out as mercenaries for the Colchican in Mexico. The Greeks started out as mercenaries for the Persians, okay? The Mongols started out as mercenaries for the Chinese. The Akkadians started out as mercenaries for the Sumerians. The Mamluks started out as mercenaries for the Ayyubid dynasty in Egypt. In every instance, what happened is the mercenaries eventually got to a point where we are the ones killing ourselves for this empire. The empire is corrupt, decadent, and weak. Why don't we just take it over? And they did, okay? We're seeing a similar situation play out today in the Middle East, where Israel was created by the British and Americans to be their pit bull, to be their aircraft carrier in the Middle East, to create as much instability as possible so that the Americans and the British could control the oil supply in the Middle East. And this has gone on for decades, and now the Israelis are like, wait a minute here, we're the ones doing all the work, we're the ones making all the sacrifices, we're the ones that are getting all the hate in this world. So why shouldn't we be the empire now? America's useless. Okay? All right, so this is a pattern throughout human history. And so we're going to look at what this means. Okay, so Israel has something called the Greater Israel Project. And this is what extremists in Israel believe. They believe that God in the Bible promised the entire Middle East to the Jewish people, okay? Extending from the Nile in Egypt all the way to the Euphrates in Iraq, okay? And it also encompasses Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and parts of Turkey as well, okay? Now, something really funny about this map is this. Iran, Persia, is not part of the Greater Israel Project. So then you're asking yourself, wait a minute here. If Iran is actually not part of the Greater Israel Project, then why is Israel going to war with Iran? Well, the reason why is, if they want all this territory, their main enemy is not Syria, that's been destroyed. It's not Iraq, that's been destroyed. It's not Saudi Arabia, it's too weak. Not Jordan, it's too weak. Not Egypt, it's too weak. Not Lebanon, it's too weak, okay? Their main enemy is the American Empire, okay? In the Greater Israel Project, it's the Americans that control the land of Greater Israel, the Middle East. These are American bases. So in other words, you use this war against Iran to destroy the American Empire. How? By forcing the American Empire to go and invade Iran. And when this happens, America will be too overextended, and then they'll be forced to retreat from the Middle East, okay? And so eventually America will be defeated. America will be forced to retreat from the Middle East. And that will leave two regional powers, okay? Iran and Israel. And again, because of the Greater Israel Project, the Israelis have no problem with this. Persia is, again, not part of the Greater Israel Project. The Israelis don't really care if Iran is still standing. They want Iran to be as weakened as possible, okay? But they really don't need to defeat Iran to achieve the biblical prophecy. But they do need to defeat the Americans, all right? The Americans are in the way. All right, okay, so what does the Greater Israel Project mean? Well, it means control of the world's oil, basically, 20% of the world's oil. So these are the gas fields. The yellow are the gas fields of the Middle East, all right? And the blue are the trade routes. So you can see how Israel is at the very center of all this wealth, right? They have the logistics, they have the technology. It makes sense for them to take control of all these resources and then start shipping these resources to Europe as well as to East Asia, China, South Korea, and Japan.